As dusk settled over the hillside terrace, the remnants of a storm were visible in wisps of cloud and patches of damp earth. Two figures, a woman and a man, sat silently on the edge, overlooking the valley below where lights flickered like fireflies against the darkening sky. The woman was the village herbalist, known for her calm demeanor and quiet resolve. Her hands were rough but gentle as she meticulously sorted through dried roots laid out before her in rows of various shades of brown and gold. Beside her, the man had only just arrived at the terrace, a stranger drawn by the view and the promise of solace. He sat down without speaking, his presence acknowledged with a subtle nod from the herbalist. They both stared out into the evening, the silence between them comfortable, unspoken. As twilight deepened, the herbalist turned to him, her hands now clean but for the faint scent lingering on her skin. "Would you like some tea?" she asked softly, though it was more of an offer than a question. He nodded, accepting without hesitation. As they waited for the water to boil in a small pot beside them, he watched her fingers move gracefully, preparing herbs and leaves with a gentle precision that spoke of years spent nurturing growth and decay alike. When the tea was ready, she poured it into 2 cups made from clay found nearby, each one unique in its imperfections. They drank quietly for a while, the steam curling upwards like wisps of thought caught in the air. Afterward, as if struck by an inner prompting, he reached out and took her hand, holding it lightly without needing words. She returned his gesture, their hands clasped briefly before she released him with a smile that held no need for explanation. As night began to fully claim its dominion over the land, they sat in companionable silence once more. The stranger prepared to leave but was stopped by her gentle voice again. "Stay," she said simply, and he stayed, the offer felt as deeply as the cool evening air around them. In the darkening hours, there were no words needed anymore. They shared a blanket and watched stars emerge in the sky overhead until even that light faded away into blackness. When morning broke over the hills, she woke to find him gone but for his presence lingering in her thoughts like an early dawn whispering of quiet days ahead. She smiled as she packed up her belongings, the roots back in place, her hands clean and ready once more for whatever came next. The cup he had used lay beside hers, untouched since their silent farewell.
You're listening to the Empty Teahouse. The cup still held a little warmth when she wrapped her fingers around it. A lantern flame swayed once, then steadied again as the night deepened over the riverbank.
A riverbank where boats are pulled up at night. The water laps gently against the wooden hulls of the sleeping boats. The air is cool and carries with it a scent of moss and distant smoke from hearth fires. A man sits near the water's edge, his back to the village, hands folded in his lap. He wears simple clothes, patched at the elbows, and seems to be waiting for something. Across the riverbank, a woman approaches quietly, her steps muffled by grass that has begun to turn golden with age. She holds a small basket under one arm and carries a kettle of hot water over both hands, careful not to spill. When she reaches him, she sets the basket down and places the kettle on the ground beside it. "Are you thirsty?" she asks without looking at him. "No," he replies softly. She kneels then, her skirt spreading around her like wings. She opens her basket, revealing a small towel wrapped around something slender. Unwrapping it carefully, she lays out several lengths of dried fish and some pieces of sweet bread. Beside these, she sets down 3 tiny candles and an oil lamp that flickers slightly in the breeze. "I brought you food," she says, still not looking at him directly. "I made the bread this morning." He looks at her then, his eyes searching hers briefly before returning to the ground. "Thank you," he says after a moment. His voice is warm but distant, as if speaking through a veil. She nods, setting out 2 plates and placing one of them in front of him. She herself takes only a small piece of bread and a single fish. They eat without talking, their breathing steady in the night air. The meal done, she collects the remnants neatly into her basket while he watches silently. She then picks up the kettle again and begins to pour hot water over each candle, causing them to light almost instantly from the heat. After lighting 3 candles, she moves to place the lamp closer to his side of the riverbank so that its glow falls on him warmly. "Good night," she says quietly once everything is settled. She stands up slowly, brushing her skirt down before turning towards the village again. He watches her walk away for a moment but doesn't call out after her or rise from where he sits. As the soft rustling of her skirts fades into the quiet of night, he shifts slightly and picks up one of the lit candles she left behind. He holds it aloft, its flame trembling gently as if unsure about what lies ahead. The fireflies are just beginning to appear in the evening sky, their faint lights catching the edge of his candle's flame for a moment before drifting off into darkness once more.
The lantern flame swayed once, then steadied again in the cool mist of evening. In late autumn, the orchard stood quiet and bare, leaves crunched underfoot with each step.
In late autumn, the orchard stood quiet and bare. Leaves crunched underfoot as Ada made her way between the rows of empty trees, each one stripped clean by winter's approach. She had walked here every morning for weeks to gather fallen fruit, but now there was little left. Ada stopped at a spot where a young pear tree bent over an old stone well. This was the place where she always sat to rest. As she lowered herself onto the dry earth, her hands found the worn wooden bucket beside the well. She lifted it, its weight familiar and comforting. Each day she had brought water to this small orchard from another well up the hill. Beside her, a boy appeared with a large woven basket. He set it down near the pear tree and looked at Ada with wide eyes. "Hello," he said softly. His name was Leo, and he lived in town but visited his grandparents who owned the land. Ada smiled kindly. She had seen him before while walking through the orchard, though they never spoke. Today felt different. The trees watched silently as she handed the wooden bucket to the boy. Leo took it carefully, running a finger along its smooth wood. "Can I help you carry water?" he asked, looking up at Ada's face. She nodded. "Sure," she said simply. They walked together down the hill toward the other well and back again, making 2 trips. Each bucket of cold water splashed into the old stone well with a muffled sound that seemed to echo in the quiet orchard air. At noon, they stopped by an apple tree where Ada usually left her tools for evening walks. She reached inside the basket Leo carried. "I baked a pie this morning," she said, handing him a piece wrapped in wax paper. Leo unwrapped it slowly and took a bite. He closed his eyes briefly as he tasted the sweet filling mixed with the tartness of autumn apples. "It's delicious," he whispered. They sat together under the apple tree without talking, listening to the wind stirring dry leaves around them. When Ada stood up finally, she said, "Thank you for your help." She picked up her small bag and began walking away from the orchard. Leo watched as she disappeared down a path beyond the trees. He lingered there a moment longer, holding onto his empty basket like it might suddenly be full again. Then he looked back at the pear tree bent over the well, feeling the weight of its branches in his own arms and shoulders. Later that day, Leo returned alone to this spot in the orchard. As before, he filled the wooden bucket with water from the hillside well and carried it here. The earth felt cold through the fabric of his boots as he knelt beside the pear tree. Setting down the bucket gently next to the stone well, he took out a small knife from his pocket and cut an apple from one of the nearby branches. He held it up to catch the afternoon light before taking a bite.
The wooden bucket sat by the well, waiting for another day. On a quiet afternoon in early autumn, rain had just ceased to fall over the small town of Nara.
On a quiet afternoon in early autumn, rain had just ceased to fall over the small town of Nara. The footpath that wound through the woods was slick and damp, yet still someone ventured out into it. An old woman named Kyoko walked steadily along, her steps slow but sure. She met a young man at a bend in the path. His name was Takashi, and he carried a large bundle of firewood on his back. The wood had been soaked by rain, making it heavy. "Good day," Kyoko said to him, offering a small bow from her hips. Her hair, tied up into a bun, framed her kind face. Takashi smiled, setting down the burden with an exhale of breath. "You should not carry such a weight in this weather," he told her kindly. Kyoko waved his concern away. "I am fine," she said softly. She pointed to a spot near a fallen log and gestured for him to sit while she adjusted her own pace. "I live nearby," Takashi explained as they both took their seats, "and I was gathering wood for my grandmother." "And how is she?" Kyoko asked, taking off her shoes and placing them neatly beside the path. "She is well. She enjoys having me around but misses her husband dearly," he replied with a faint smile. His eyes seemed to look beyond her into the distant trees. Kyoko nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that feeling." A moment of silence followed, during which both observed the droplets of rain falling from tree branches back onto the wet ground. "Do you have children?" Takashi finally asked, breaking the quiet. "No," Kyoko answered gently. "My husband died when I was young. He had hoped we would have them." Takashi listened quietly and then offered a thoughtful suggestion. "Would you like to see my grandmother? She speaks of her memories often and with great warmth." Kyoko's eyes brightened at the idea, but she said, "I think I will walk just a little longer today." She stood up and tied on her shoes again. Takashi followed suit, picking up his wood. He held out an arm to take some of Kyoko's weight from her shoulders as they walked together back towards town. They made it halfway before the old woman stopped and placed her hand upon a small spruce sapling. "I will come see your grandmother another day," she promised with a smile, stroking the delicate needles gently. Takashi nodded and let go of his offer to help. As they said goodbye at the edge of town, Kyoko paused by an old stone well. She took out her handkerchief and wiped it clean before putting it back into her kimono sleeve. The simple action caught Takashi's attention. "Why do you clean that now?" he asked curiously. "It is a custom from my youth," she replied softly, a distant look in her eyes. "I am reminded of better times." Takashi watched quietly as Kyoko slipped the handkerchief back into place and began to walk away towards her home, with no need for him to go further than his own path. He turned around and started walking in the opposite direction, down another street leading somewhere new. The quiet afternoon rain continued its gentle patter on stones and leaves.
Somewhere in the distance, a single leaf drifted down towards the wet earth. A winter night fell over the small town as old Mr. Lee hunched beneath his straw hat.
A winter night fell over the small town as old Mr. Lee hunched beneath his straw hat, his steps shuffling along the cracked concrete of a narrow alley between two clay walls that seemed to grow closer with each passing year. His lantern swung back and forth, casting long shadows that danced against the rough-hewn bricks. At the end of the alley stood a noodle stall where steam rose from bowls of hot broth, and a single chair sat waiting for customers who never came. Mr. Lee knew this place well. It was here he had once spent an entire evening alone, warming his bones after wandering through the cold streets of town. The noodles were mediocre, but the warmth was welcome. Tonight, however, someone else had beaten him to it. A young woman sat at the lone table under a flickering bulb, her shoulders hunched as she stared down into her bowl of noodle soup. Mr. Lee paused just inside the alley entrance, wondering if he should take his leave and seek shelter elsewhere. The cold wind was biting, but this alley felt like home. "Come in," the woman said without looking up. Her voice was soft yet firm, as if she had made her decision long ago. Mr. Lee shuffled forward and pulled out a chair beside hers. He held onto his hat, unsure how to proceed until the noodle vendor himself appeared from behind the curtain at the back of the stall. The man looked tired but nodded at Mr. Lee before moving towards the young woman's bowl to top up her soup with hot broth. Mr. Lee watched as the vendor silently returned and served a second bowl for him, setting it down on the table without a word. A moment passed before he reached out and picked up his chopsticks, twirling them through the steaming noodles. The aroma filled his nostrils, reminding him of simpler times long ago. They ate in silence at first, both lost in their own thoughts as steam rose between them. After a while, Mr. Lee noticed that the woman's hand was twitching slightly where it rested on the table, no doubt from the chill that crept into her bones despite the warm meal. "Is your hand cold?" he asked softly. She looked up at him for the first time, her eyes wide and startled. "Yes," she said after a moment. He set down his chopsticks and reached across the narrow space to take her hand in both of his own, warming it between them. It was rough with work, but still soft from age and care. She seemed surprised by the gesture, yet grateful for the warmth. For some time, they sat like that, him holding her hand, her eyes downcast as she continued eating her noodles. The vendor kept a watchful eye on them, but did not intrude further than bringing another bowl of broth when their bowls were empty. Eventually, Mr. Lee returned his hand to the table and picked up his own chopsticks again. "Thank you," he said quietly, though there was no need for words. Neither one felt it necessary. They finished their meals in companionable silence, the cold slowly giving way to a shared warmth that lingered long after they left the noodle stall behind. As Mr. Lee turned back into the alleyway towards home, the woman's hand still tingled warmly where he had held it. The night seemed less daunting with the knowledge of simple human kindness.
The lantern flame swayed once, then steadied again, casting long shadows that danced against the rough-hewn bricks of the narrow alley. The stories have walked through mist and rain, dusk and night, with only a flicker to guide them. We close the door now. Until tomorrow.